All right. Good morning, everybody. I am so excited to have Dr. Nicole Gruel with me this morning. Hello, hello.
Hello.
Welcome to Loving Life After Loss. I have to share a couple of things before I get Nicole to introduce herself. So Nicole and I met through a common mentoring group, I believe. Please correct me if I'm wrong, but that's where our whole journey, our paths crossed. And I came across your group. And I will ask you in a moment to share a little bit about your group as well. I've got a billion questions for you today. I'll try to keep it structural. And I was just absolutely impressed with who you are and what you do. And one comment that you made on a particular post really made me reach out to you. And I said, I need you to come here and talk to my audience. I will get to that comment. But before I do, can you please introduce yourself to our audience?
Hi, everybody. It's such a pleasure to be here. And thank you, Marie, for having me along. I love your tribe as well and what you're about. It's such a potent topic.
Yeah.
So I'm Dr. Nicole Gruel over in Sydney, Australia. My background is in transpersonal psychology or spiritual psychology. And I spend my days talking with people about their life-changing spiritual experiences, pleasant, unpleasant, and how on earth they've integrated them, what they want to do with them, have gifts come about as a result of them, and how do they get their gumboots on and be the change they want to be in the world.
I love it. I love it. So tell us a little bit more about your doctor. How I have never heard about this before till you mentioned it, because I said, what's your doctor in? And I was like, wow, I've never actually heard that you can study that. Can you share a little bit about that and
Yeah,
what
I
made you
never
do
knew
that?
that either. Absolutely. I was so glad when I found a name for what I was like, oh,
Yeah.
that's a term for me. I have a home. I guess the quick way of saying it is, when I was a kid, Deepak Chopra was like my hero. He was this doctor who was talking about things that really made sense to me. He was articulating my world in many ways. And I thought, wow, I think that planted a seed somewhere deep in me that you can have an authority title such
Yeah.
as being a doctor, but use that in a way to validate people's spiritual experiences. That was the key for me.
I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
So, I mean, that has been the story of my life, that I've had numerous types of these experiences, and we're going to get into some of those, but those have really shaped who I am, how I walk the world, my relationships with people, what I feel I'm here to do as well. And so I just wanted a way to really put that into a way that society, because you have to play the game on some level, so a way that society can recognize and go, oh, okay, so this person isn't a total nut job. Because often the scary thing is actually when people are talking about visions, or they hear things, or some of these direct experiences that folks have, the reality of the world that we live in today is you can end up with labels and medicalized. So I mean, it's kind of funny, but it's not, so when you can actually speak about it from a very grounded place and as an experiencer, what I feel it does is just give more space for people who are having the experiences to bring them forward and say, me too.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And I've noticed that a lot when I spoke out about things, in particular in my group, Loving Life After Loss, where at first I thought, I can't possibly say, come on, be happy after you lost someone. And it's not that in a nutshell that I would ever address it that way. But this is, in a nutshell, my message, that I want people to be able to allow love and joy and happiness back into their lives after having experienced a significant loss. And it's all about, like, how do you actually translate that, and how do you say it in a way that people don't feel put off or scared off, but actually it's like this opening door that I always call it. You open a door, you don't rush people in, you don't push people in, you don't pull them in, you just open the door and let them experience it. And I think it's so beautiful the way you do that in a really natural and beautiful way. And I love that. And also that you say, finding names for it is really important, because society does tend to need a couple of labels, and as much as I don't like them, sometimes they do help in naming things and understanding things. So if you don't mind me jumping right into that,
Yeah.
would you like to tell us about the experience that you shared with me that you had at the age of 12, I believe? Is that right?
Yeah, 14,
That's
14,
oh,
yeah.
14, sorry.
So, and you're absolutely right on that too. You know, death and spirituality are like these two taboo areas that modern society just doesn't want to touch or talk about, and
Yeah.
yet they happen. They
Mm.
happen to
Yep.
everybody, you
Yes.
know, on some
Mm.
degree or some level, whether we use that term spirituality or
Yeah.
not. So my first experience at 14, we were whitewater rafting over in New Zealand.
Mm.
And forgive me, New Zealanders, any of you watching, I can never remember the name of where we were, but you'll know it. It's a 10-meter drop. It kind of goes
Wow.
across this crazy river and just drops down 10 meters. It's a pretty famous fall. So we went
It's somewhere near
down,
Wellington, probably.
probably,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Anyway.
And so we went down the first time, had an awesome time, and went, let's do that again. It was so, you know, the adrenaline that comes from
Yeah.
these types of things. Let's do it again.
Mm-hmm.
So we went the second time. This time the boat tipped and I flew out of the boat. I'm not sure what happened to the others, whether they were out of the boat or not. There was my friend and two instructors. And I grew up a swimmer. So I had a swimmer's response. I just, you know, put my arms up to swim, right?
Yeah.
But what happens when you do that and you have 10 meters of waterfall pounding down is it just goes like this and pushes down, right?
Yeah.
So I got pushed very deep, very fast. And all around me, I had my eyes open and the water was black. And I did not know which way was up or down. So there was no point in even trying to swim, right? So I surrendered to that moment. And then I was filled with sheer panic. I knew this is my last breath. That was the thought. And then straight away, I was filled with total calm. Just as fast as that, from sheer panic to calm, something just switched. And in the black water all around me, again, with eyes wide open in black water, a horizon of light opened up. And for those of you that have seen the movie Ghost, it's like that scene where the reunification happens with Sally and Molly, is it? With Sam and Molly.
Yeah.
And it was exactly like that, the horizon of light. And walking towards me in that horizon of light was my samurai grandmother, so my maternal grandma, who at the time was actually living. And I've only met one other person who's met a living relative in their near-death experience, though I know it does happen to others.
Yeah.
Not so common. And my first dog, a pet, which was like my sibling, coming towards me, who had passed over. So one living and one non-living. And I was 14 years old, so my thinking was, it's a little unusual. What are you doing here?
Yeah.
And then I heard this voice, clear as day, a male voice right here that just said, Nicole, remember to breathe. And with that, something kind of kicked in, I think, in my, you know, command center here. And I remember I was supposed to curl up like a ball because I had a life jacket on. And so I did. And I popped up like a cork to the top. And that was that. And I mean, no one was sitting there with a watch counting, but apparently I was down somewhere between 1 to 2 minutes, they think. And we were just glad at the end of the day that we were alive. We made it back. We didn't get the police looking through our bags and finding a carton of cigarettes that we'd smuggled as teenagers. You know, I mean, we were kids, right? So I just left it at that. That was that experience. And I just carried on with my life. And little was I to know that that one experience would carry on and still carries on to this day to really help pave the way into how I operate.
I found it so fascinating. Like, even though I heard the story for the second time now, like I'm sitting on edge and going like, what's next? What's next? You know, like my heart's pounding. I'm having goosebumps just listening to you. And I know that this is part of what you said before, you know, that you're not the only person, obviously, who had near-death experiences. Yet once one person speaks up, it gives others the courage to go like, oh my God, it wasn't just me. I'm not going mental here. Like, this is actually a true thing. And obviously, nowadays people speak more and more openly about these things, and it is a very well-known factor that there are hundreds, thousands, 100,000 probably of people out there who have had near-death experiences. Yet it really takes courage to speak up about it, because you do go through this stage, especially when you're 14, where like, you know, am I mental? Am I going nuts? What was happening here? But at the same time, you know, this is so real. You have seen what you have seen. So Tell us a little bit about how you went with that experience. Did you ever tell anyone, or how long did it take you to open up about it? Because obviously now you do talk about it. So, what did you do with the experience after that?
It's funny, I can't recall, and I've tried to recall, but I don't know when I first started talking about it.
Mm,
It was just such a normal part. So something interesting with near-death experiences, those who have them as kids are quite different to those who have them as adults.
yeah.
Because as an adult, we kind of have these mental frameworks, these
Mm,
paradigms already in place of this is how the world operates.
mhm,
And if I have an experience that is radically outside of that, then my paradigm is shifted and I have to
yeah.
reconcile that as an adult.
Mhm,
As a kid, though, which is what happened to me, because I had this experience, and I should pre-frame that with I also had a very open family in terms of they were just
yeah.
mentally, spiritually open as
Awesome.
well.
Yeah.
So
That really helps.
totally, totally. And so there was nothing abnormal about it. And so as a kid,
Mm,
when you have one of these types of experiences, and it doesn't have to be as dramatic as a near death, but even,
mm,
some pretty profound experiences like
yeah.
this that are non-ordinary,
Mm,
as a child, because we don't have such strong paradigms and frameworks set
mm.
up, they can just be incorporated much
You're
more
so much more
easily.
open to it. Yeah.
So much because kids are
Yeah.
open, right? I
Yeah.
mean, yeah, those of us who have hung around the little ones, I mean, they just come into the world open and
Mm,
magical. So, and as we age, we lose that, right? We
yeah.
we move away from that. So I think it happened to me still in that open framework where I didn't question it, it just was. It
Mm,
happened, and so I didn't feel like I needed to reconcile it in any way that it was unusual.
mhm,
And it was only until, through my 20s, I was very drawn to ashrams and
mhm,
meditation and yoga, that kind of
mhm,
pathway. And I had these I realized through experiences that I actually had a very open third eye center. I have a
mhm,
very strong visionary field.
mhm.
And again, we all operate assuming that everyone sees the world as we do, right?
Yeah.
Until we learn that that's not the
Yeah.
truth.
Yeah.
And so I just assumed that everyone was having these experiences. And so it was when I was
I
sharing a lot
love
of
it.
those, yeah, we'd
Yeah.
sit in meditation and I'd be going on these, we'd sit in half an hour meditation or 1 hour and I'd just go on these wild adventures and we'd come back and share. And other people would be like, oh, I felt, warm and tingly and nice. And oh, I
Mhm,
feel very calm. And I was like, really? I went here and there and I saw this.
mhm,
And so after doing that several times, I just started to learn, oh, okay, that's a little bit different. And
mm.
this will be common to anyone who's had some kind of out there experiences. There comes a point when you start to discern, where do I share this and
Yeah.
where do I not, right? And
Mhm.
often in our excitement, we just want to share it and shout it from the rooftops in the beginning, but it's not always going to be received.
Mm.
And people aren't ready to hear. And so I think it was through my own journey of evolving and carrying on that I started to look back on when were other times that I'd
Mm.
had significant moments, and that one
Yeah.
continues to pop up. There have been many others, but
Mhm.
that one continues to pop up as probably the biggest first one
Yeah.
that had occurred. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I kind of see life as this ongoing integration.
It is so beautiful. I really love that because I have to say I understand what you're saying. I really do. But I find it such a shame that we tend to have to. I don't like using the term have to quite frequently, but in that case, I kind of find it suitable to say we kind of have to put labels on things, or filters, I should say, not labels, filters on things, how and when we share them and with whom, because it's such an um, we have to understand that so many people have got completely different upbringings and completely different understandings and also pathways to spirituality. And there are so many cultural differences as well, how people are brought up. And I was brought up in a quite strict Catholic family. For me, opening my heart and my eyes and my mind to spirituality was quite a daring journey for me. And yet again, I didn't find it that daring because I was always like, I was born like that. I was like inquisitive and wanting to know and wanting to learn and wanting to connect and wanting to experience. And I was always out there. And my mom always called me a gypsy because I was constantly on a journey. I always
Mhm.
wanted to stay at places and go places and experience things. And I did. I never let anything stop me. Yet I also had to learn, who to share things with and what to share with them to not, be completely labeled as a nut job, so to say. I shouldn't, yeah, it's quite negative when I say it that way, but you know what I mean. It's like the whole journey through spirituality has brought me through very different cultures, religions, beliefs, and spiritual beliefs. And I was always very, very open to it. And I don't even want to say that I was like picking and choosing, oh, I like this and I like that and I don't. And it's like, you know, make up your mind sort of thing. No, I don't. It's an ongoing journey of discovering. And
Mhm.
I just absolutely love that, because when you keep your mind open, this is when you meet the most beautiful people. And this is how I met you. So I really, really love that. Would you like to share a couple of those other experiences before we go on to the other
Absolutely.
really, really significant one?
Sure. And you know what I'm reminded of, because you know in your conversation with your tribe as well and around grief, is that these are parallel conversations.
Yeah.
You know, in terms of who do you share, when do you
Yeah.
share, how do you share, do you share? You
Yeah.
know, there are moments on the journey,
Yeah.
right? And you have to discern. So exactly the same thing. Um, so a couple of others, when I was about 30, I'll give you two more that are kind of relevant,
Mm,
like a trinity, these three. So another one happened about my 30s. I had a healing center at this point. You know, I was counseling and doing all of these kind of alternative things.
mm,
But I realized I didn't enjoy the business aspect. I love
yeah.
people, I love their journeys, their stories, but not the business.
Mm,
And so I shut it down, and it was a big decision. So as I shut down these things in my outside world, it actually triggered an inward event of shutting parts of my identity down as well. And I liken it to peeling the onion. So I had this
mm,
spontaneous 3 days on a sofa,
mhm,
and I was in and out of ordinary and non-ordinary states of consciousness.
mhm,
Consciousness. I had not taken any medication,
mm,
hallucinogenics, nada,
mm,
nada. I was
mhm,
just spontaneously in and out, and with a very high fever. So, you
mhm,
know, maybe I was slightly delirious, is how it would have looked from the outside,
mhm,
right? But what was happening in my consciousness is it was taking me on a journey of clearing and healing.
mm,
And it was peeling these layers of onion, where each one of those was a piece that I had identified with at some point. It had given me strength and structure. But in that moment, it was no longer needed. And so they were being peeled away, and each of them related to parts of me and my own story as well. And you would know this through the through the journey of grief.
mm,
Our bodies hold everything. Our bodies
yeah.
have a memory of all of it from the
Mhm,
moment of conception
yeah.
throughout. Our cells retain this memory.
Yeah.
And so if we don't process stuff like grief, like big transformative experiences, if we don't move through that stuff that has happened, it just gets lodged somewhere in the body. And our body is so wise and generous, it just holds it until we're ready for it, right?
Mhm,
And so this was a moment, these 3 days, where my body was ready. My psyche was just ready to process it.
mm,
So it went through this thing, and it just peeled through the layers of the onions, and it was very kind of shamanic in flavor. I
mm,
went down, I met my ancestors, and
mm,
you know, healed some things that was in my cultural DNA in terms of unresolved business in our family and stuff that had, you know, rippled through the generations,
mm,
as it does.
yeah.
And then some of the wounds that had happened in my own past incidences as a child, that, you know, I didn't realize how much they had scarred and wounded me, but they needed to be
Mm,
healed as well. So all of these pieces, traumas, got healed spontaneously. And at the end of that, when it came to the very, very core, I started freaking out a little bit at this point, mind you,
mm,
because again, it's identity being stripped away. And so
yeah.
this force in the process, you know, I was holding on to, my name is Nicole, and it was like, that gets ripped away.
Mhm,
Okay, I am a girl on a couch.
mhm,
That gets ripped away, until there was nothing left but a tiny, tiny pinprick of light, like the
wow.
tiniest pinprick of light. That was
Wow.
it. And I knew in that moment, I understood that this is all I am. This is all I am. This is all I ever was. This is all I ever will be. This is
Yeah.
it. And everything external to this, or in addition to this, is a game that I get to participate in and create. You know, life is symbols and structures and patterns that we then get to construct, because we're very clever and
Mm,
creative as human beings, and so we get to participate in it. And life for me changed after that point. That was like one of those big life aha
mhm,
moments of, okay, this is how it all works. So now, how do I want to choose to operate in the world? How do I want to choose to navigate it, have relationships with people? What do I want to do? So that was beautiful. It was painful and ugly and beautiful all at the same time. And then to
What a
integrate
tremendous
something.
gift, though. What a tremendous gift to
Yeah.
be, stripped bare, basically, to literally, I wanted to say the speck of your soul, but that would really minimize what your soul actually is. But, to really have that gift of new perspective about what's actually there, essential within us, and what we are made of. And it's just really beautiful. So, yeah, how do you integrate that?
That's right. That's right. And so integration for me really looked like, okay, I have a knowing now, and day by day I get to walk forward with that knowing and experiment now out in the world and see what happens from here. So so that has continued to be the story till this day, I guess. And those of your listeners, Marie, that have had an experience like that, I'm sure will be going, oh yeah. I get that.
Yeah.
And then the second one, the third in the trilogy, was quite recent, actually. So when I birthed my baby girl almost 3 years ago now, and I had a revisitation of that same horizon of light. So we were in a birthing suite after 90 hours of labor. And I'm a pretty natural girl, so I was being incredibly stubborn, and I just wanted to do this thing naturally. And that ended up getting us in a lot of trouble, because 90 hours in, we weren't in a good scenario. And so there was a medical intervention, and they put me on the happy gas, and that stuff was the best thing. That's the best thing ever invented. I tell you what, I'm so grateful to the happy gas person.
I had it with my first birth. I loved it.
Oh my, they couldn't take the thing back off me again. And that, it must have been something about the happy gas that triggered that amidst 90 hours and not sleeping and all the rest going on, but all of those factors combined, in that moment, one part of my consciousness was in the birthing suite with the chaos of what was going on, and another part of my consciousness was revisiting that exact same horizon of light that I had seen underwater. Only this time, of course, how many years later? Many years later, I knew where I was this time. I had language for it. And I actually could verbalize and tell my family, I think I'm having a near-death experience, and one of us might not make it. And one of us meaning either my daughter or myself.
I'm having goosebumps all over my body when you say that.
It was pretty crazy. And I look back at it, I'm like, gosh, my poor family. Like, for me, it was just so clear that this is what I need to say at the time, right? But heavens, what were they thinking, right? And bless the hospital staff that must hear all of these strange and wild things all the time, and what the way they have to process it. Anyway, good news is both of us survived it. And but an interesting thing happened in that experience, where, as crazy as it all was, that knowing part of me, that greater part, knew that everything was absolutely perfect. Absolutely perfect. And that's really hard to say if you don't, for someone who's never had that kind of an experience or perspective, to hear, what are you talking about? That's 90 hours and, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, that seems pretty weird. But there was a part that just knew this is exactly how it was supposed to be. And I could see my own struggling and frustration through all of that, and my own ideas of how it was supposed to be. And that greater part of me was in hysterics. It just thought it was the funniest thing that all of this drama was playing out when it was actually always so perfect. And that was so healing for me, because that would be labeled a traumatic birth, what happened at the hospital, and we had an emergency cesarean, and that's not how it's meant to go. The story's meant to go. And there are so many mamas and dads who walk out of hospital highly traumatized by the experience, which is really not how, anyway, that's a whole other problem. But I was so grateful, because already knowing traumatized mamas and that experience otherwise should be categorized as traumatic, because I had had that moment of pure grace that had caused me to laugh on the inside and known it was perfect. I just walked out of that hospital light as a kite, with pure gratitude.
Wow.
And I was like, that was exactly how it was meant to be. All I have to do is heal. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
you know, and so I feel blessed. I feel
Yeah.
really blessed by these types of experiences that just
Mm.
let me know it's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Again, what a blessing, actually, that part of your consciousness was so in this state of everything is perfect, everything is exactly how it's meant to be, because it gives you such a calming background. And what more support can you get throughout labor, especially when everybody else around you is going so mental and really, there's all this hectic and panic happening in hospital staff and not knowing who's going to survive or not, especially after what you verbalized. But then you being there completely calm on the inside, because this is all part of the picture, this is all part of your journey, and it's all perfect as it is. This is such a blessing in amidst all this chaos, because for me, I remember, like, I had the happy gas with my first one, because I'm going to share this experience just very quickly because I just absolutely love how these things unfold in hospital. And my very first one, I had a 3-hour 45-minute labor, so which is for a firstborn, as most mums know, really, really short. And when I got there, they wanted to send me back home, because they said, you're only 1 centimeter dilated, go home and come back in 10 hours. And I'm like, no, you don't understand, I'm not going anywhere. This is it. It took me so long to get here on a 10-minute drive, but it felt forever for me because my poor husband at the time, he had to stop the car with every contraction. And I was like, stop the car. It's like I just needed peace and quiet around me to breathe. And it was so funny. But yeah, I dilated so quickly, like within 1.5 hours, I dilated to 10 centimeters, where they said it would take me 9 to 10 hours. And because of that mindset, them telling me, first birth, it's usually a centimeter an hour, I had this vision of me having to endure that for 9 to 10 hours. But little did I know, I was ready to birth. That's why it got so intense. And I thought, this intensity, I can't cope with that for 9 to 10 hours. So, the baby's coming. And they were all like, what, how? This is just so quick. And by that stage, I was in complete bliss state, because I knew as soon as she said to me the baby was coming, I switched back to, oh, this is perfect. This is why it's so intense. I can handle this. I went from, there's no way I can handle this, to I can handle this. So it's really amazing how mindset does such a huge amount for us in that scenario, that I went from complete, I can't do this, I need an epidural, to, I'm fine. As soon as the obstetrician walked in, I was like, I'm going to have a baby. And he was like, oh, thank goodness I'm here. It was midnight. They had to call him and wake him up. So it was quite hilarious, actually. So yeah, it turned into a really, really good birth experience for me, luckily, because I went from this not knowing first time, but something inside of me told me, trust your gut instinct. And I knew there's no way I'm going back home. This baby's coming.
Beautiful.
You can tell me whatever you want, I'm staying here. I just trusted my gut instinct. And this whole scenario became really the most magical experience for me, being part of creation. I was so blown away. It's like, oh my God, this is, I just made this little baby. It's like, with a little help of my husband, of course, but so I did this. So yeah, absolutely magical. So have you ever talked to your family after that experience, how they went through that? They must have gone through so much panic, you telling them one of us might not make it, yet probably trying on the outside to stay calm for you and to keep it all together. But how do you want to share that? Have you talked to them about
Yeah.
that?
Well, I think because that was still at the early stages, we were still yet to go through the, actual epidural
Yeah.
and all the rest, the cesarean.
Mm-hmm.
And so it just became even more dramatic after that. So
Yeah.
yeah, we've certainly spoken and had processing around what has happened. And I think the elation of new life coming into the world kind of overrides,
Yeah.
in many ways, the traumas of the moment. But I think it's healthful still to revisit every now and then those types of conversations.
Mm.
And yeah, we've touched on it. We've certainly touched on it.
Yeah.
And again, like grief, you over time, things shift, and
Mm.
you're able to have different layers of a conversation.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, yeah.
It's so beautiful. I never thought about it that way. That is so true. Yeah, it really does go into different levels. And I revisit a lot of things, from um, from my experiences, but in particular my husband, because he's the most recent one. It's coming up to 2 years next Friday, actually. So um, it was only 2 nights ago that my now 10-year-old had another really big cry about him, and it was quite some time since he had this last really big cry. And we went through so many layers of that day, like when he last saw his dad, and he had not opened up about that to me in such depth before. And we both laid in his bed crying our eyes out about it. It was so beautiful, but because he was so beautiful for me, and the tears were mainly for me because I could feel his pain. And, you know, as a mum, nothing tears your heart apart more than when you see your little one in pain and you can't help them. And I knew that all I could do was listen to him and hold space for him. And I thanked him for sharing his emotions with me, because it's something that doesn't come easy to him. He is always like, he wants everybody to be happy. So when it's something negative or painful, he doesn't want to talk about it. And sometimes it would, you know, build up for months before he comes out with it. But he actually shared with me, he said, you know, the day we walked to the station, and I knew exactly what day he meant, because it was the last day he saw his dad when we walked him to the station, and he was catching a train to the airport to fly out on a business trip. And I said, yes. And he said, you know, Mum, I knew that day that something really bad was about to happen. I could feel it, and I wanted to hold Daddy back. I didn't want to let him go on the train. And he cried and cried. And I was like, oh my God, he had never shared that with me before. And fact is that I felt something was different as well. And also my older son was crying, and he never cried when my husband left. You know, he was the strong one, and he, you know, not that he didn't enjoy when my husband was away at all, but he was never like that, you know. And my little one was always crying. So, but something was different that day. We could all feel it, and nobody actually really spoke about it till he opened up about it 2 days ago, you know, almost 2 years later. And so that's just the fact, you know, the coming back through different layers once you start processing things, and once you let those huge waves die down a bit, and then you can actually go a little bit deeper into it. So I find that really, really beautiful. I want to ask you, how old is your daughter now? Is she 3, you said?
Almost 3.
Wow. When is her birthday coming? Well, you might not want to share
Yeah,
those details on
well,
Facebook. That's
soon.
fine. I'm not going to ask you.
Soon.
But what I would love to know is, tell us a little bit about your group. How, when, what triggered it? What triggered you to start this movement? Because I really love what you do in this group. And as I said, you know, one of the comments was about that near-death experience, and also about different cultures. So I want to go into that cultural background a little bit more as well. But tell us about your group first. What triggered it? What planted the seed for you to go, like, I need to start a tribe here, or a movement, or whatever you call
Yeah.
yours?
So it's called Agents of Awesome,
Yeah.
and the term came up spontaneously when I was talking with a group of people who have had these, you know, extraordinary or super ordinary, however you want to call it, experiences, these spiritual experiences. And a frequent conversation we have is gifts that come out of that, and then how you apply those in the world. You know, when you have a transformation, by nature of the word, you are changed in some way, and usually change for the better. And what mostly happens to folks like that is they then want to help others on their journey, right? Regardless of what the transformation was, they come to a point of, oh, well, I just went through all of that. I made it through the shit. I'm okay now. I survived it. And I actually know that I've come out of that with tools that maybe it can help one person, maybe it can help a million, you know. So I want to lead forward. So it was within that realm of a conversation that the words Agents of Awesome just popped out. And the folks that I was talking with, they were like, yeah, Agents of Awesome. Yeah. And I was like, yeah, that's a great name.
We found it.
So we found it. So that's where it started. And when I understood the tribe, you know, that this whole idea of building a community around a cause, you know, that really spoke to me. And the big reason for me is because I know folks who have had these experiences, one of the biggest areas they suffer with is a lack of validation. So often
I
people
can only
will
imagine.
be, they will be fearful to tell others.
Yeah.
Again, whether they end up with some kind of a psychiatric
Yeah,
diagnosis.
it comes back to the labeling by society. Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
right. And first people might question themselves and go, am I going mad? Like this is not how I normally operate. My mind is not right.
Yeah.
Or is it?
Yeah.
Because I've actually never seen or thought more clearly
Or
before.
is it? Who said that?
Right. What's going on. So
Yeah.
there's that initial thing. And then there's the next layer of fear, which is, are the people around me that are close to me that I love, are they going to think I'm nuts? And if they do, will they ostracize me? So that's
Yeah.
a really sensitive layer.
Yeah.
And then there's the greater societal piece, right? Is society going to think I'm nuts? So once we get over the validation piece of, you're having these experiences, it doesn't mean that you're going crazy. It means that there are openings that are taking place that are transforming the way that you see and view the world, and you're literally expanding in your consciousness.
Yeah.
So naturally that's going to challenge closed parts of our consciousness that are freaking out about opening up. So the validation piece, and there's all of these other components, that these so-called agents of awesome have to deal with before they even get to the place of knowing, why am I here on this planet? How do I want to use my time? What is the nature of the relationships that I want to have with people? What kind of presence do I want to be on the planet? And how can I help? Here I am on Earth. How can I help? Right? I'm here for service, checking in. So before we even get to that, there's all of these other pieces, particularly depending on the type of experience someone's had. The world of spirituality is so often painted in this kind of love and light and woo-woo fairy tales, unicorns, whatever. It's not, there are highly distressing experiences that happen within it. And this is where the journey of spirituality, people will be familiar with, like, the dark night of the soul. That's a spiritual crisis. So not to say that all spiritual experiences are dark, they're not at all, but they're often very challenging, very similar to grief and loss. We are transformed profoundly. These things rock us to our core. They bring out, this is where they're so common, they highlight our values. What is most important to me?
I love that you say that. It is so true.
There's nothing like losing something.
It strips you bare to your absolute essential, bare essential.
Just the bare essentials.
Yeah.
Like if nothing else existed, because that's how we feel when we lose someone close to us, nothing does exist now.
Yeah.
What is keeping me here? That's how core it gets, this stuff. So that's where these experiences are so similar. And once you have those experiences and you connect with your core, you connect with your center, and you understand what it is that compels you to be here, what gives your own life meaning and purpose, your whys.
Yeah.
Once you're connected to that, that is an unshakable place that you can operate from. It gives you such incredible strength to do anything in the world. And that's how we get through these things, right? So we carry on knowing what keeps us centered and grounded, and onward we go. So agents of awesome are folks that are kind of anywhere on that spectrum, but they've had the experience and they're moving all the way through into, entrepreneurship, their own pathways in the world. Often they're highly creative beings because they're on the edges of regular society, right? They're paradigm shifters. So these are the types of folks that are there.
That's amazing. I just absolutely love that, because I never heard the reason for your movement in such detail, and I just really love how it came about. And what I want to add to that as well is when you talked about the core values, when you really connect to them and you become so aware of what your core values are. And the more often I get asked this question, and you see this question asked in various groups. Only yesterday I saw it in another group, somebody asking, what are your core values? And I went like, bang, 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 bang. They are my four values, because this is just so I'm so connected to them now. They're such part of my daily being. Yet I also understood, because I started thinking about it, I'm like, only four, really, Marie? And then I'm like, well, they're my main ones. They're really important to me. And it is love and truth and growth. And I can't remember what the fourth one was now, although I only said that yesterday. But it always comes back to these things, and growth and love are one of my two most important ones. It's trust and truth. That's why it was so similar. That's what trust, truth, growth, and love. They're my four really core values. But it doesn't mean that these are your only ones. You have your core values, and through various experiences in your life, you might keep adding to them and growing that, but you might also strip back from some of them that you thought at one stage were important. And I also, when I read through that, I started thinking, yeah, but what about family? I'm like, well, family is love. There is, that is completely incorporated. What else is family to me? When I look at my boys, there couldn't be any greater love than what I experience when I look at them, And in my movement in Loving Life After Loss, I call what you've just talked about, what you've just shared, I always speak about the hidden gifts in adversity. And I have my 14-day journey, my healing journey, that I always invite people to come through. And one part of that, so I teach 14 different tools and techniques, how people can deal with grief, how people can get different perspectives around their loss. Because at the end of the day, a huge part of the healing journey is shifting perspectives around what we have experienced and understanding it from a more positive part, as in how we can grow through that, what we can actually gain from that as well. And I'm not running around saying like, oh, it's great that you lost someone, what have you gained from it? That that would be such a slap in the face when you ask people that. And this is not how I address that. Yet a stepping stone of this healing journey is finding those hidden gifts in your adversity. And I'm a huge believer that every adversity comes with hidden gifts, but sometimes it takes a lot of healing or some time or a shift in perspective to allow yourself to actually see them, and then even further to apply them. Because I always say, you've paid a huge price for this gift, you may as well apply that. And that in itself is such a huge game changer for people when they have experienced such a significant loss. And I always, I make a huge point about not comparing losses, because every journey of loss and grief is so unique, just like the person experiencing it. Yet I feel there is another layer to when you lose your own child. It is really such a depth and such a, it feels so unnatural to lose your child before you go. It's not the natural order. And yet I feel at some level there is always that bigger picture and the bigger path and a journey that was pre-written. But again, that goes into beliefs where some people might not share that, and I totally appreciate that, and I don't want to force my beliefs onto anybody else. And you certainly can't put this general label, oh, there was a reason for it, on it, because that doesn't work for me either. It takes time, it takes processing, it takes allowing yourself to go on that healing journey and really find new perspectives around this loss. And not everybody will get to a point where they appreciate that, and I appreciate that too, as in really accepting that everybody's path is different. I'm not here to force anything on anybody, and I believe that you are built the exact same way. It's opening doors to somebody who will need it, and those people that it speaks to, that your message speaks to, will come in. So I'm a true believer on encouraging and empowering people to find and speak their truth along their journey. And that is something so different for everyone, but it is the most beautiful and rewarding thing. And I believe that you do very similar things in your group.
Yeah, I'm right there with you on opening doors. I call it invitations, and I think that's all we can
Beautiful.
do
I love it.
is give open doors, give invitations, and if
Yeah.
people want to walk on it, adventure in it, great. If
Yeah.
not, great.
Yeah.
Not my story, not my business.
Yeah.
All we can do is offer. So absolutely.
Yeah.
And you've touched a few times on, there was so much there in what you said, but I guess there were two important experiences that I did also want to share with your community, especially around grief and loss. But I hadn't even mentioned it, but close to my near-death experience, I also lost my father.
Mm.
within that window.
Yeah.
And it was sudden. It was on the other side of the world. I was
Mm.
very angry at him at the time. In fact, I
Mm.
was enraged by my father. There were substance issues,
Mm.
and he was a very loving man. He was always a really loving man, but he was just not present in some
Mm.
ways. Even in anyone who's had someone who's gone through substances will understand this. They can be
Yeah.
physically present, but
Yeah.
absent in so many other
Yeah.
ways. And so as a kid, I was angry about that and him harming himself in many ways. So when he died very suddenly,
Mm.
I was just so angry about so many things for so long. Why did he
Mm.
do that to himself, and blah,
Yeah.
blah, blah. And that death happened within 6 months of the near-death experience
Mm.
as well. So it was a near-death, his death, and also within that 6-month window, we lost 2 other family members. It was like a domino effect. And I'm sure
Mm.
your community might have spoken about this sometimes, where
Yeah.
sometimes when one member of the family dies,
Yeah. The
others will
compound
actually
grief.
go,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
but others will
Yeah.
actually die as well
Yeah.
because of
Yeah.
that grief. And so that happened in that family. And so that ended up being a lot of compounded grief for a
Mm.
teenage kid to not,
Yeah.
like, I had no idea how to deal with that level
Mm.
of grief. And my 20s really was pretty much a journey of unpacking grief.
Mm.
That's
Yeah.
one way of looking at it. And what was so paramount in that journey was the passing away of my grandmother. So that same samurai grandmother
Yeah.
that was there under the water that day has continued to be like some guardian spirit presence
Mm.
in my life, some grand master teacher
Mhm.
that has shown me different doorways. And one of them was when she left this planet. In Japan, they do it so differently to how I
Mm.
grew up in Australia, very
Yeah.
Western way of doing things.
I love that. I'm so glad you're sharing this.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And in Japan, it's just so different. And
Mm.
so there they spend time with the body after
Mm.
someone has passed away. So first of all, she was leaving her layers of her consciousness and her spirit were leaving her body in the hospital. And it was a prolonged process in hospital where they shouldn't have kept her as
Mm.
alive as long as they should have. They should have just allowed the natural cycle of a body's closure to
Yeah.
complete. But you know what it's like in hospitals, they have
Mm.
this thing to keep people alive
Yeah.
as long as possible. So they tried to do that, and I was reading this incredible book at the time called the Tibetan Book of Living and Dying.
Mhm.
And in it, it explains through the elements, earth, fire,
Mhm.
water, air,
Mhm.
how these elements leave the physical body as
Yeah.
someone is transitioning from this life to the next, or to wherever we next go. And I was reading this book and I was witnessing it happening in front of me. It was
Mm.
marvelous to have this tool right there.
Amazing.
And because it was a slow process, it took about a week. And then once she passed, we brought her body back to the house, my Japanese family's home, big old house with a lot of family history.
Mhm.
And I mean, they treat the body in a way where
Yeah.
you can,
Yeah.
keep it. But we actually slept in the same room. So this is my mother's mother.
Mhm.
Me, my mum, and my mum's mum were all in the same room.
Yeah.
So we were sleeping there with the body. And I tell you, as a kid that had grown up in the West, I had this element where I was pretty freaked out by this.
Yeah.
I found it strange.
So you were only 14 at the time, or
I
was it
was
later?
no, I was in my 20s by
Okay.
this
Yeah.
point. I can't remember
Mm.
where in there, but somewhere in my 20s. And it just seemed strange to me, like, hey, there's my grandma right over there, and we're gonna sleep right over there on the
Yeah.
mattresses on the ground.
Mm.
And yet over the week-long experience where her body was there and they kept treating it, and over that week they put it in a coffin and they do different ceremonial
Mm.
ritualistic things that are highly symbolic of the journey. We were able to sleep in that room, dream in the same space together. We had an altar with all the ancestors, as every Japanese house
Mm.
does. So that was the room of the ancestors. And it just gave me this appreciation that there was something way bigger going on that was beyond my comprehension, but that was important. And this is just the way that it's done.
Yeah.
And people from the village and the surrounds had the opportunity to come and give thanks. We had strangers rocking up who the family had never met, but they knew my grandmother and they
Mhm.
needed to say thank
How
you for
beautiful.
them. It was incredible.
Yeah.
And family got together and had feast, and it's like, and there's the body body in the casket, you know. Now, again, that might sound really strange to the Western ear, although there are some traditions even in the West where they do this, they
Yeah.
understand this. And so it totally, for someone who had had so much compounded grief for years and not understood how that does things in terms of packing on emotions, packing on thoughts, packing on weight, it just packs stuff on the
Yeah.
body, right? To then have this experience of, wow, this is such a healthy way to say goodbye.
Yeah.
It's such a healthy way to grieve.
It's so beautiful too.
It was
It's so
incredible. And
respectful and
it's
so loving.
loving
Mm.
and honoring and so delicate of every
Mm.
single step. And even then, when they cremated her body,
Mm.
they have this way where they have these very long special chopsticks that they use, and they pick out these pieces. And apparently, when you cremate a body, there's this one bone that doesn't disintegrate out
Mhm.
of everything else. And it's shaped like a little Buddha, like a little prayer. And
Really?
everybody has it
Wow.
somewhere in their body. I think it's somewhere in the skull. And they
Wow.
pick that out and they put that right on top of all the rest of the ashes, because that's part of their sacred thing. And so just
I
all of
never knew
these,
that.
yeah, either did I, right? You don't
Wow.
know until you go through it. And all of these
Huh.
very respectful ways of honoring and saying goodbye. And when I've come back to the West and I've attended other funerals since, I've actually been quite saddened that of how abrupt it is in
Mm.
our Western world. It's very, you have to say goodbye. It's very clinical, cold
Mm.
and clinical. Say goodbye.
Mm.
You have a quick moment where maybe there's a viewing, maybe there's a not.
Yeah.
Everyone comes together. Everyone says goodbye very fast.
Yeah.
And then it's like you don't see the body, and you
Yeah.
don't spend time with it in between. And
Mm.
it's like that is the vehicle that was housing our loved one, you know?
Mm.
So that kind of has saddened me in some ways. And I would love if we could, you know, like in India, they take it and they go down to the, you know, they burn it right down by the river, and
Mm.
it's so natural. It's
Mm.
so natural. And I really feel that we have lost in many ways our natural connection to
Yeah.
the cycle of life. And that
Yeah.
cycle is a cycle. There are points in
Yeah.
it that we need to acknowledge
Yeah.
and be with. And I get that they're painful,
Mm.
you know, but as we can acknowledge them, whether it be death, near death, you know,
Mm.
shared death, as we can be with those, we have a deeper and richer experience of all the rest of the stuff, of
Yeah.
life, of birth, of
Yeah.
relationship, of love. It
And
just
it brings a lot
enhances
more
it.
peace as well, because I believe
Totally.
that with everything in nowadays society, like everything is built to you know, be fast and efficient and now and quicker and faster and bigger and you know, or smaller when it comes to technology, whatever, you know. And it's just everything is just more and more efficient and fast. And for me, you know, when this whole COVID-19 thing hit us, it was like such a and it sounds terrible to say that because I know there was a lot of death and devastation as well. But the one really good thing that came with it was this global slowing down, and you know, that everybody needed so badly. Because I remember so vividly, only a couple of months before this whole thing started and became, you know, the global news and that everybody talked about, I had this um, really present thought. I remember I was actually standing here in my bedroom. I had this present thought of, this is just so weird. The whole world is so fast. Something's going to explode in a second if that doesn't slow down. And I thought, how on earth could this ever slow down? Something that has developed um, so fast, there is no slowing down anymore. You can't go backwards from that. You can't take cars away from people and go like, go back on your bicycle or go back on your horse, or you know, that it's just impossible. You're not going to start ripping down highways or taking down the internet or things like that. Everything that's just so way too fast for my liking, and I think for a lot of other people's liking as well. But you have become so accustomed to it and have so accepted it as what is, that you don't, or feel like you can't question it anymore. Yet I had this really profound and very clear thought about it, and then a couple of months later that happened, and I'm like, oh my god, that's the answer to it. And yes, it does come with a lot of the devastation as well, excuse me, but it has brought so much goodness as well. I feel it has really brought so much awareness back to us, to what's really essential, what's really important to us. And this really intense need for love and connection was really highlighted in that time too, you know, when people started talking about social distancing. And I'm like, it's not social distancing, it's physical distancing that we need, but it has brought so much social
Mm.
connection in that. I did a whole chat to Emily May about that, our positive psychologist, but we're coming completely off topic here. But really, I wanted to bring that in because it's just such a profound thing that happens nowadays with awareness and slowing down. And when you shared this cultural experience with me, I thought, this is so beautiful. This is how it's supposed to be, taking time for something that is so profound, which is the last journey on, like the last physical journey on this earth, you know, to actually honor that and celebrate that and do that in a nurturing, caring, and really honoring way. I love that. So
Yeah,
it's
because
just so
we do,
beautiful that
we
you were
rush
blessed to be part of
grief.
that.
We
Yeah.
rush grief,
And
and
then we
it's
wonder
like,
why people struggle so much with coming to terms
yeah,
with it and moving forward, you know.
that's right. And people feel like they can't talk about it, like,
Yeah.
oh, it's okay, it's been a
Yeah.
year now,
Yeah.
so
You got to
therefore,
be done, you know,
no,
you're done.
that's
Year's
right.
over, you're
Whatever
done
that
grieving,
means.
move back to work and do this. And I'm like,
Yeah, whatever
yeah.
that means, and I, with my father, I mean, I was 14 when
Mm,
I lost him. I still grieve my father. I
mm,
still would love him to be around.
yeah,
That was a long
yeah,
time ago, and we have a different kind of relationship now,
yeah,
but
mm,
it doesn't replace a physical loss. Nothing ever
yeah,
does. And
no,
so it's okay to have different layers of
yeah,
that over time, and screw
no, I
anyone
agree.
that puts a timeline on it. Yeah. I'll take as long as I damn well
Yeah,
want. Thank you very
yeah,
much. This is my life.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I hear you loud and clear. It's been 28 years for me since I lost my dad, and I still have my moments. I was 20 when he passed, so showing my age here. But it was really something that kept coming back to me over the years when, you know, you go through the layers and you grieve through your layers. But when my dad passed, I was so not equipped with anything that I'm equipped with now. I had no background in self-development. I had no background in mindset, you know, how you can cope with that. I had no tools. All I had was society's expectations of how you're supposed to grieve and deal with it. And also because I was an adult with 20, you're like, you know, you those last couple of steps away from really feeling like an adult or really having your life
Mm,
together. And to me, those were these crucial years where I really wanted my dad to be around because I just loved him. I had a really, really strong connection with my dad. I had a really loving relationship with him. So for me, that was horrendous to lose him so abruptly. Um, yeah, he died within a month. So it was really like, you know, the cancer came back that he had survived, and within a month he was gone. It was just so fast, you know, there was no uh, time to say goodbye, really. I missed that as well. So I really struggled with that for many, many years, that I left not knowing that that was the last time. I felt cheated for the chance to say goodbye to him. And then when I lost my husband, I was 45, so it was such a different age, and I had such a different background. And I say this to this day, that if I hadn't had my background in working with people around mindset for a decade, um, I don't know how I would have coped. I learned so many different ways of coping with it, and I thought this is my chance to really apply them in a way that I so need this right now for myself, for my boys. I knew instantly my focus was, I want to create a happy life for us, no matter what, no matter how. I need to do this. I want to do this. And I also felt I owe it to him, because we always said, you know, if something was to happen to us, I would want you to be happy. I would want you to carry on with life. I want you to live life to the fullest. We always said that to each other because we loved each other dearly. So that's what you want naturally for someone you love. And none of us thought that this would be ever happening. You know, this is like, not that we didn't mean it, but we still thought that was theory that we talked about, you know. Yeah, anyway, so I totally get that. It comes back in layers, the grief. For although I was 20 and you were 14, my boys were 8 and 10 when they lost their dad. You know, they were not even combined, where they're as old as I was when I lost him. So there's so many different layers that you feel like there are all these milestones. And for me, the milestones were the ones that got me. When I saw, you know, when I met my husband, when I gave birth to my boys, I always went like, I wish that I could be here and see them and meet them. And, you know, so yeah, I totally get that. And I think there
mm.
is no time frame to how you grieve or what you should do. But I also want to mention here, and I'd love to hear your opinion on that. I so often hear when people say, oh, grief never ends. And I don't believe in that either. I don't see it as an ongoing, you have lost someone, now you will have to grieve forever, and this hole will be there forever. I don't believe in that. And I don't mean it in a disrespectful way. I just believe that things like that come in waves, and I don't see it as an ongoing grieving process per se, as people see it as something negative, some sadness that is always underlying and is always there. I don't see it as such. I feel like there are moments where it comes back. It's like moments of happiness, moments of sadness, and there's so many different emotions that come into our lives, and some of them hang around for longer and others don't. So I'd love to hear what you think of that whole statement of grief lasts
Yeah.
forever and never leaves us. How do you see that?
Emotions is where I was going to go also, and I think
Yeah,
waves is a really great way of describing that. Emotions, by their definition, are, energy in
yeah,
motion, right? And
yeah.
so grief is one of this multitude of emotions that we humans are able to
Yeah.
experience. And so naturally in at the outset, when we lose someone, or not even someone, I mean, when something happens that we grieve, because there's many layers to grief,
Mm,
and many times when we can grieve, the waves, that's when the tsunamis come, right? And we
mm,
feel like we're going to drown and we can't breathe, and how am I ever going to make it
mm.
through this?
Yeah.
But they don't sustain in the same way. Um, and so, but again, everyone's experience is going to be really, really different of that.
Mm,
And so maybe for some, those sustained periods are going to be a lot longer and more intense. What I've generally found is over time, things, like the waves in the ocean, they
yeah.
start from the tsunamis, but they gradually go out. Do they ever totally taper off and they're not there? Well, again, that's each person's experience. You're going to
Mm,
have to check in with yourself about that. But what happens is all these other emotions, we have the capacity still to experience them. So once the big tsunami ones, in this case is grief, have started to subside, we're reminded that there are other waves in this
mm.
ocean that we can
Yeah.
also experience. And so that can be a really weird and refreshing moment when we start to have a different emotion than
Mm,
pure raw grief through a
mm,
grieving experience. And of course, there are other layers associated with that, feeling guilty for being
mhm.
happy or smiling. And,
Yeah.
it's very complicated. But this is the nature of energy in motion. And so I really just see it all as energy in motion. We can honor all of it. None of it's right, none of it's wrong. It's
Mm,
just this, we are energetic beings, right? We are
mm.
water beings. Most of what our element is water as well. And so we
Yeah.
have this capacity to be with the flux and the flow of
Mm,
these things, and that is perfectly okay.
yeah.
Perfectly okay. It might look really strange from the outside to different people. And I know folks who have been criticized for not grieving because they look like they're not grieving on the outside when they've, say, lost a child.
Mm,
And it's like, you have no idea what's going on inside that person. None.
mm.
Just because they don't have the tears, they don't look like they're grieving,
Yeah.
you have no idea. And so all of us will have those energetic forms in motion in different ways, in different times and patterns and complexes
Mhm.
over our time. And so I can't give a clear answer on does
Yeah.
grief ever disappear.
Mm,
I really, I like that way that you describe as
mm.
waves. Sometimes they're bigger, sometimes they're smaller,
Yeah.
in this infinite ocean that we are.
I love it. Nicole, I only just realized we are already way over time. Not way, but a few minutes over. However, I still want to ask you one more thing.
Yes.
I'd love for you to share a little bit about your book. I happen to have one here.
Oh, you do. Woohoo. So the power of notes. Notes is an acronym for non-ordinary transcendent experiences.
Love it.
Yeah. And so
Mm,
it's about how they transform the way we live,
mhm,
love, and lead.
mm,
In essence, it is what we were talking about with the Agents of Awesome
mm,
journey, what we're talking about here too today through grief, these transformative experiences that we have that rock us to our core.
mm,
And as a result of that, once we process and move through them, they shift how we operate in the world, how we live, how we love, how we lead. And that's a beautiful thing, because by honoring those in how we move forward, it's very respectful to what has actually happened in our life.
Yeah.
We're not burying it away. We're not, kind of just turning a new chapter in our lives and getting on with something different. We're saying that happened to me. That was profound. And I want to take that and consciously integrate it into how I move forward in the world, so that I'm a better person to be a better person on this planet. So in a nutshell, the book kind of addresses that. You can get it for free. We'll put the link up, and folks can download the book for free, as well.
You're so beautiful. Thank you so much for that.
Well, we got to get on with it. We got to get on with it, Marie. Like, let's not waste time. This America's literally burning. I mean, this world is burning in so many ways. Let's not waste time, folks.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that you say that. Thank you so much for that. Nicole, I want to thank you so much for your presence, for your gifts that you have shared with us here today. And what I would love for you to do is, when we finish this interview, I'd love for you to go back and share your links in the comments, how people get in touch with you if they want to connect with you. Please feel free to share the link to your group as well, if people feel drawn to that, so they can share and come into your group and share their stories with you. And I want to thank you for the gift of the link to your free book, that you're giving that away for free to my community. I really, really love that. That is beautiful. Thank you so much for your presence today. And do you want to share any final words, any final messages with the audience before we go?
Just to thank you right back at you, Marie. I love what you're doing. I think holding space for this kind of conversation is so important, because again, there's no timeline, and these it's important to just have these moments where we can tap right in again to those parts that are important to us. And so I'm just cheering you and your group on all the way as well. I think it's fantastic.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I really, really appreciate it. And I also want to put a little disclaimer here at the end of this interview, because I also totally understand that everyone's beliefs are very, very different. So I just invite you to really think this through with an open heart and open mind. And I I'm also aware that today I didn't have my phone on me. Usually I check if there's any comments or questions during the interview, which I didn't do today because I started the interview and realized I left it in my car and I didn't want to run back. So I thought
get to the
that's
comments.
fine. We will check the comments. So if there's any questions for the interview later on, Nicole and I will both be checking in. So I just want to say thank you so much for being here today. Thank you everybody for listening and being with us, and I bid you a fond farewell.
Bye.
Bye for now.